Hello, BookTube. I want to read you another psalm on this cold, clear Sunday, the first Sunday that I'm talking to you in the new year. Today, I want to concentrate on Psalm number 15. And we have a number of different versions that we'll read to see what we make of it. We'll start, as I think we'll start every time, with the King James Version, which goes like this. It's a short psalm, so you won't have to, you'll have to hear it many times, but it won't go on forever. Psalm number 15. Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? He that walketh uprightly, and worketh righteousness, and speaketh the truth in his heart. He that backbiteth not with his tongue, nor doeth evil to his neighbor, nor taketh up the reproach against his neighbor. In whose eyes a vile person is contemned, but he honoureth them that fear the Lord. He that sweareth to his own hurt, and changeth not. He that putteth not out his money to usury, nor taketh reward against the innocent. He that doeth these things shall never be moved. So we have the basic outline there. It's a basic outline of what the psalm is trying to say. A question is posed about who is righteous in the eyes of the Lord, and then answers are given that affect a code of conduct for life. And I'm assuming that a lot of you who will be listening to me on these Psalm Sundays will not be able to read the original, nor even the Vulgate. I'm assuming that you are relying on translations. And when you're relying on translations, it helps to look at a lot of them and to wonder about the translator. Instead of assuming that every translator is translating completely clear from what they're seeing, does the translator have an agenda? I know it's a quagmire, but we have to ask these questions when we're relying on translators, especially when we're relying on translators for texts that we are not only going to read, but revere. So let's look at a few more translations of Psalm 15. Now, since you have the King James still fresh in your memory, this is the New English version. So this is an update on the King James. And this is King 5 in the New English. O Lord, who may lodge in thy tabernacle? Who may dwell in thy holy mountain? The man of blameless life, who does what is right, and speaks the truth from his heart, who has no malice on his tongue, who never wrongs a friend, and tells no tales against his neighbor. The man who shows his scorn for the worthless, and honors all who fear the Lord, who swears to his own hurt, and does not retract, who does not put his money out to usury, who takes no bribe against an innocent man. He who does these things shall never be brought low. And that line in the fourth stanza that we keep hearing over and over again, I want to make sure that you know what we're talking about here. Until we get to more modern translations, it'll make it a lot clearer. That line that says, he swears to his own hurt and does not detract, meaning you're willing to attest to the truth even when it hurts you. That's what it means, not swear to his own hurt in a more direct sense. But that's the New English Bible. Now we'll move on to the Jerusalem Bible. This thing here. This is the New Jerusalem Bible. Let's see, this is much more modern. Let's see what they have to say for Psalm 15. Yahweh, so there's a big change right there, right? The person's being addressed, his name has changed. Yahweh, who can find a home in your tent? Who can dwell on your holy mountain? A little bit of a change there from tabernacle to tent. It's basically a pavilion of tents is what we're talking about. But also we're talking about the building that houses the actual tabernacle, the actual Ark of the Covenant. Yahweh, who can find a home in your tent? Who can dwell on your holy mountain? Whoever lives blamelessly, who acts uprightly, who speaks the truth from the heart, who keeps the tongue under control, who does not wrong a comrade, who casts no discredit on a neighbor, who looks with scorn on the vile, but honors those who fear Yahweh, who stands by an oath at any cost, who asks no interest on loans, who takes no bribe to harm the innocent. No one who acts so can ever be shaken. This is, there are a few changes going on there, right? That is a milder version than either of the two that we just heard. It's more general. There are some manifest changes. Who does no wrong to a comrade is a change. Also, who asks no interest on loans. asking no interest on loans is slightly different from usury. Usury is asking excessive interest on loans. It's in some ways, I think, a blander version, but also a lot more generally applicable. And when you're talking about general application, you want to look to modern, sprawling, enormous biblical ministries whose vocabulary is often every bit as old school, Ozark, Dell, fire and brimstone, as was the oratory of their grandparents and their great-grandparents, but their message is often a lot more blunted because they very much want megachurch status. They very much want 20, 30, 50, 100,000 people in attendance. And the hard but unavoidable reality of building a megachurch is that you can only do it if you offend the least number of people. It won't work otherwise. So what if we were to look at a more modern, the most modern version of this that we can come up with? Let's go to, in some measures, the internet's #1 resource for this sort of thing, Bible Gateway. I'm pretty sure that if you were to Google pretty much anything involved with the Bible, Bible Gateway would be in the first 3 responses. And that's not just them buying the algorithm, that's also use. So let's see what they say. This is their Psalm 15. Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? One whose walk is blameless. One whose walk is blameless, who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from their heart, whose tongue utters no slander, who does no wrong to a neighbor, and casts no slurs on others, who despises a vile person but honors those who fear the Lord, who keeps an oath even when it hurts, and does not change their mind, who lends money to the poor without interest, who does not accept a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things will never be shaken. Now, I want to point out some of the strengths there, right? By removing any hint of antiquated language, this version manages to speak a lot more directly to a modern viewer, or a modern reader. There's no harm in that. There's, in fact, a lot of good in that. What was it? The line that I mentioned, the line that we kept hitting over and over again, is perfectly done here. By removing the antiquated diction of all the other versions that we heard. The line, who keeps an oath even when it hurts. That's perfect. That works perfectly. That is completely direct English. The mention of one whose walk is blameless, that is not a stroll in the garden. That is where we have to start talking about the agenda of the translator. Because in modern Christian parlance, especially in the evangelical tradition, especially in the megachurches, you have a walk of faith. That's a term. You have a walk of faith. You talk about your walk of faith. It's not in the original. It's added here in order to create greater resonance with a blander, definitely monoglot, but probably unscholarly audience. There's another change in here. Did you catch it? A really important change, and something that really makes it important to think about the agenda of the translator. Why is this so popular? Why is this the version that is read out at megachurches? A lot of those megachurches are either directly involved in the so-called prosperity gospel or are directly adjacent to it. A lot of the people who attend those megachurches, who fill out those stadiums as big as a football stadium, full of people, a lot of those people, sure, they might be there to confess their sins, although I doubt it. I doubt it. Confession doesn't seem to be much on the minds of the congregations or the pastors in the particular faith tradition that I'm talking about. They might be there to do that. They might be there to feel the Holy Spirit, to feel the Word of God moving inside them in a way that their private contemplation cannot do. But quite a few of those people are there because they're looking at God as a meal ticket. If I do the right thing here, I'll get reward. I'll get increase on my seed. So I'm not just thinking about the still, quiet voice inside me. I'm thinking about the mortgage. Now, I think there are a great many Christians throughout the history of Christianity who would say that that is a profanation. And of course, we're talking about Christianity here because this psalm is being read in 10,000 more Christian churches than it is Jewish synagogues. And those Christians are all reviewing this as life advice given, inspired by the Holy Spirit through King David. But a lot of those churches, a lot of the things that would pave the way for this to be one of the most popular versions of this psalm, have that mind frame somewhere in the back furniture. That some part of this faith experience is about money, is about worldly goods, about increasing them, about how that's not sinful. And there's a change in this version of the psalm that I think speaks directly to the agenda of the translator along those lines. The line changes completely with one simple term. It goes, and who lends out money to the poor without interest. Not who lends out money without interest or without usury. We've gone even further than lending out money without interest. We've gone to lending out money to the poor without interest. Why would a translator make that change? It's not in any of the other versions that we heard. Why would they make that change? Well, I don't know. I don't know anything about the people who put together this particular version of the New International Standard. I have no idea who they were or what their thoughts on the matter were. But on a flat reading of the text, one reason why you would add that is in order to make it okay to lend out money to people who aren't poor. As a way to get around a stricture in the text. I could be wrong about that, but I could be right about that. Better to take it with a grain of salt. Better to do exactly what we're doing now for your own text, even your own sacred text, and look around. Test your translations. Go to your big bookstore, your big box bookstore. Go to their religion aisle. Find the whole 2 shelves of Bibles. Take a couple of them down at a time. Not more than that. Don't be a jerk. People might want to browse that section. Take a couple down at a time. Sit right there on the floor. And compare a couple of passages. And do it quickly. Don't linger and don't, absorb. Say, I like this one better than this one. Or, I like them both relatively evenly, but this one is loaded with explanatory notes and this one's not. Go around those shelves. Study what you're going to look at here to get at what you like. And pay attention to little differences like that. That, I think, makes a difference. We've gone from not lending out your money for usury to not lending out your money at interest at all to not lending out your money at interest to poor people. Is that important? It might not be, but change, you should note every single change that the translator brings into the text. You notice that a couple of those first 2 translations that we read were essentially identical. Then they start to change. Well, pay attention to those changes. But what can we say about the psalm itself? Well, I think we can say 2 things, main things about it when we sit back and think about it a bit. One is something that might glide right by you. This is a call and response type of psalm. The first verse, Lord, who may dwell in your what am I doing? I don't like this translation. Let's go to the King James. Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? That is the singer of the psalm. I don't want to, I don't want to wrap a newspaper over your nose, but King David did not exist. The attribution of the Psalms to the legendary King David is just that. It's a legend. It's a myth. It's a comfortable myth. So let's go with it, just the way we go with Homer as the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey. But if we go with King David, let's leave out what we know about his personal baggage and just talk about him as the author of the psalm. The author here, let's say King David, is asking these questions at the beginning of the psalm. Now, Psalms have the Psalms and also the Jewish Bible just in general have a very specific way of denoting when God is speaking. Thus saith the Lord. It's never left out. It's always carefully enumerated, and it is absent in this psalm. The speaker of the psalm asks that question directly and then answers it directly. You are not getting anything from God in this psalm. You're getting the speaker of the King David is asking the question and then giving what he thinks is the answer. He could be wrong, right? But is he? Leaving aside what the baggage that we know about King David, and also for the purpose of talking about this thing, which we've gone on way too much length here, but I love this sort of thing. Let's also leave aside the personal baggage of what we know about the Old Testament God. who he does. Let's just put it this way: he does not bear moral scrutiny. That's the easiest way to put it. He does not bear moral scrutiny, and this is practically a laundry list of things that he has actively done. It's not that he says that he advises people to do the opposite. Let's talk about just the prescripts here, regardless of who the author of the psalm is, and regardless of who the dedicatee of the psalm is. These are all really good advice. These are really good ways to live. He that worketh righteousness and speaketh the truth in his heart. Notice the change in the most modern version that we did was not speaketh the truth in his heart, but speak the truth from his heart. Which is a big difference, because speaking the truth from your heart in the 21st century is very akin to speaking your truth. Which is not that far off from saying that viruses come from the devil. So we live in a very flexible age in its relationship to the truth. So you have to pay attention to Psalms talk about truth all the time, and righteousness, and walking in truth. You have to be careful when a modern pastor or a modern congregation wants to warp that. You have to be careful with modern pastors and modern congregations just in general. Although I can give you a few easy rules of thumb, especially for those of you who are in the great swath of the middle of the United States, not the East Coast and not the West Coast, but pretty much everything in between is dominated by a revanchist fundamentalist Christianity. Whether you see it in your own maybe academic community or not, it's completely dominated by that. So for those of you in those communities, I can give you an easy rule of thumb. If your pastor has a jet, change your church. But anyway, so these are some of the precepts that we're being given here. He that worketh in righteousness, he that speaketh the truth in his heart, he that backbiteth not with his tongue, nor doeth evil to his neighbor, nor taketh up reproach against his neighbor. Most of that, at least in its bare bones, is very good. You certainly want a prescription against doing evil against your neighbor, in whose eyes a vile person is contemned, but he honoreth them that fear the Lord. I'm not happy with the dichotomy that's suggested there, that a vile person is someone who doesn't fear the Lord, and by extension, by reverse, people who fear the Lord can't be vile. I'm not taking it too much to heart, because of course this is the Bible that we're reading, but the Bible has a very, very strong, self-evidently strong tendency to equate righteousness with faith in God, either the Old Testament God or Christianity. When there are plenty and plenty and plenty, millions, even a billion, perfectly righteous and good people in the world who don't worship anybody or don't worship these guys. But naturally, it's still a good priest. He that putteth not out his money to usury, nor taketh reward against the innocent. I love this anyway, because my own dictum has always been give without any expectation of recompense or receiving back. Give because giving itself is a joy. So the call here is not about that. The call here is very much about a certain type of moneylender. But you can broaden it, and the later readings that we do broaden it, so that it's not about the king's treasurers. It's not about the moneyed merchants who are lending money to the king at interest, and here he is calling down the fire of heaven against them for doing that. But that's historical. You don't need to think about any context like that to think about in a pastor making a sermon out of this psalm would ask you, do you give with strings attached? Do you backbite against your neighbor? And if so, well, then are you righteous? A Christian pastor would ask you, well, if you do those things, how can you expect to dwell in the Lord's holy mountain? You can't expect to do that. The response you could give to that pastor would be, well, says David, but not says God. We know precisely when God is talking in the Old Testament, and he's not talking in this psalm. I wouldn't suggest that, though. I wouldn't suggest talking back to your pastor at all. But anyway, we've gone on long enough. That is Psalm number 15. I did one of these last year, and I really enjoyed it. And a number of you seem to enjoy it. If you enjoy it, we'll continue to do a psalm every Sunday. And if not, well, then we won't. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. This went on twice as long as I wanted. Get me going on 1st and 2nd Samuel, and you'll see length. You'll see me go on for quite some time. But I'll wrap this up for now. That is Psalm number 15, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.